There are moments in history when an entire nation holds its breath, when the future of a people hangs not on armies or strategy, but on a single heartbeat. This is one of those moments. And it begins not with a hero, but with a giant so terrifying that the bravest soldiers in Israel's army did something they had never done before. They ran. Not a tactical retreat, not a strategic withdrawal. They ran with the kind of fear that strips a man of everything: his training, his pride, his identity. They ran the way children run from the dark. And every single morning, for 40 days straight, they did it again. Picture the Valley of Elah, a wide, sun-scorched stretch of land between two ridgelines in the hill country of Judah. On one side, the Philistine army stretches across the slope like a dark storm cloud that refuses to move. On the other side, Israel's forces are camped, armed, trained, and completely paralyzed. The Bible tells us in 1 Samuel 17 verse 3, the Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. A valley that should have been the site of battle had instead become a stage for humiliation. Because every single morning, something crawled out of the Philistine camp that didn't look entirely human. His name was Goliath of Gath, and Scripture doesn't soften his description. 1 Samuel 17 verses 4 to 7 gives us the measurements with almost clinical precision. He was over 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. That's about 125 pounds of armor alone. The iron tip of his spear weighed roughly 15 pounds by itself. Just the tip. Now understand what this meant in the ancient world. Warriors in this era were not faceless soldiers behind fortifications and long-range weapons. This is a spiritual crisis. Israel had been through so much to get here. They had escaped Egypt. They had crossed the Jordan. They had watched walls fall at Jericho. They had seen God do things that defied every natural law. But all of that seemed like distant memory now, like stories your grandfather told that you're not quite sure you believe. Because right now, in the dust and heat of the Valley of Elah, God feels very far away, and Goliath feels very, very close. This is the trap that fear sets. It makes the immediate feel permanent and the eternal feel imaginary. King Saul's response to the crisis tells you everything about where his heart was. Rather than seeking God, he offered money. 1 Samuel 17 verse 25 records what was being whispered through the Israelite camp. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel. Saul was trying to buy a solution to a spiritual problem. He was treating God's battle like a transaction. And because the offer came from fear rather than faith, it attracted nothing but silence. This is where the story pivots. Not with a sword, not with a strategy, with a teenage boy carrying lunch. In Bethlehem, about 15 miles from the battlefield, there was a man named Jesse who had 8 sons. 3 of the oldest, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah, were already in Saul's army. The youngest son, David, was tending sheep. He was young enough that when God had instructed Samuel to anoint one of Jesse's sons as the next king of Israel, Jesse hadn't even thought to include him in the lineup. He was the afterthought son, the one you sent for bread. 1 Samuel 17 verses 17 to 18. Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are, and bring back some assurance from them." An errand, David was, to put David back in his place. "You're nobody. You're the shepherd boy. Go home." David doesn't take the bait. He doesn't argue, doesn't defend himself. doesn't let his brother's words settle into his chest the way they were designed to. He simply turns away and asks the same question to someone else. That calm, that refusal to be defined by someone else's fear-driven smallness, that is not the response of a boy. That is the response of someone who knows who he is. Word reaches Saul that someone in the camp is saying something different, and Saul, desperate enough to grasp at anything, sends for him. And so a shepherd boy stands before a king. And what happens next will change everything. Because he had learned something about God that most people only learn in survival, that God's presence is not conditional on your circumstances. Let's go back now and look at the Goliath story with fresh eyes, because there are layers in it that the childhood version doesn't show. Consider Jesse, David's father. When Samuel had come to Jesse's house to anoint one of his sons, Jesse brought 7 of them. 7. And God rejected every one. Only when Samuel pressed him, "Are these all the sons you have?" did Jesse mention the youngest, the one who was out with the sheep. Jesse had not considered David worth presenting to the prophet of God. In Jesse's own household, David was an afterthought, the one nobody expected anything from. This is not incidental background. This is the pattern that runs through the entire story and through much of Scripture. God makes a habit of choosing the unchosen, the overlooked, the one whose own family forgot to include him in the lineup. 1 Samuel 16 verse 7 records what God said to Samuel when Samuel was impressed by the eldest son Eliab's appearance. "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. God sees differently, always has, always will. And what was it in David's heart that God saw? What made this overlooked shepherd boy the one? The answer is scattered across his entire story like evidence at a scene. It's in the way he worshipped alone on the hillside. It's in the way he asked about Goliath while every soldier ran. It's in his refusal to wear Saul's armor. It's in the testimony he gave before the fight. It's in the fact that even after he became a fugitive, he kept writing psalms instead of writing bitterness. David's heart was toward God. Not perfectly. The rest of his life makes that devastatingly clear. But fundamentally, in the deep direction of his soul, David was oriented forward. This mountain of bronze and iron. This career killer, supremely confident in 40 years of warfare and 400 pounds of equipment. And David runs. Verse 48. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. He runs toward the giant. That detail is not accidental. The entire army had been running away from Goliath for 40 days. David runs at him. And while he runs, his hand is already in his bag, already pulling out a stone, already loading the sling. The motion is fluid, practiced, the same motion he's used 1,000 times on the hills outside Bethlehem. Only now, instead of protecting sheep from predators, he is protecting a nation from a different kind of beast entirely. The sling swings once, twice, and the stone flies. And in the half second before the stone lands, something hangs suspended. A nation's shame. 40 days of silence. A giant's certainty. God's reputation. The future of a shepherd boy who dared to ask why everyone was running. The stone strikes Goliath in the forehead. The Bible's description of what happens next is almost understated in its precision. Verse 49. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. Face down. The detail matters. In the ancient Near East, a man who fell on his face was a man in submission, a man defeated, a man whose God had abandoned him. Goliath doesn't fall backward, doesn't stagger sideways. He goes down face down, as if even in death the earth is receiving his defeat. Verse 50 adds the narrator's summary, almost as if making sure we understand. So David triumphed